Guess I'm old fashioned that I put specialized websites for weddings about on the same level as dramatic gender reveals for babies.
Yeah, hit it. Oh, hit it hard. Oh, man, strike out. Oh, not her. Oh,
Well, wedding websites were back in the news recently in ways that were also pretty dramatic. The United States Supreme Court handed down a decision in a case of 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis, in which the owner of a website design company claimed that the state of Colorado's Anti Discrimination Act, which prohibits businesses from discriminating against people of various social groups, including sexual orientation, that this law violated her First Amendment rights of free speech. Apparently, she felt that the anti discrimination laws were prohibiting her constitutional right to, I guess, discriminate. This case was in some ways similar to a previous case, which is the Masterpiece Cake Shop Limited versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission 2018 case, where you might remember a company refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple that was seeking one for an event. Similarly, Laurie Smith, the owner of 303 Creative LLC, said that it was against her religion, her religious beliefs, to participate in any celebration of same-sex marriage. Therefore, if she was being asked to make a wedding website for a same-sex couple, that would violate her religious beliefs and she should not be compelled to do so by the state law. One of the really interesting things about this case, which has been getting increasing attention, is that the state of Colorado actually sought no action against Laurie Smith or 303 Creative. In fact, Laurie Smith had not even started to provide wedding website services to any couples. It wasn't part of her business yet. In later filings, she actually named by first name only a same-sex couple that she claimed was asking her for a wedding website. However, this is where things get really weird. An article by the New Republic revealed that, in fact, no one had asked her to make a wedding website. The couple that were named in her filing didn't exist. In fact, the one person that was a real person in the filing, she provided contact information about this person, wasn't even gay. And in fact, he was married to a woman. Not being a polygamist nor gay, he was not seeking a wedding website for his marriage to a man. Thus, and this is an important distinction with the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, 303 Creative was not asked for any services by same-sex couples. And so there was no harm done to Laurie Smith. The claim in the court case was that even the potential to have to make a website for a same-sex couple, the idea that she would have to provide this service was harm. And this is what brought her complaint all the way up to the Supreme Court. And as you may have read in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court did rule that the possibility of her not being able to discriminate based on her stated religious beliefs was a violation of her constitutional rights. Specifically, it was a violation of her right to free speech. The fact that she created websites and was a designer was viewed as a type of artistic expression, and that if she was compelled to make a website, it would be a violation of her First Amendment right, saying that government shall not make a law to abridge freedom of speech. Now, I haven't read the case carefully, and I can't claim to know what the decision entails in any great detail. So I'm not sure if she made wedding websites just using stock templates and stock photos, if that would be a violation of her free speech, since there was no artistic expression being used there. We'll have to wait and see. For the three justices that dissented with this opinion, Justice Sotomayor wrote, "Today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. Specifically, the court holds that the First Amendment exempts a website design company from a state law that prohibits the company from denying wedding websites to same-sex couples if the company chooses to sell those websites to the public. The court also holds that the company has a right to post a notice that says, 'No wedding websites will be sold if they will be used for gay marriages.'" Of course, this is not the first time personal belief has been expressed through denials of service. You can go, unfortunately, throughout human history and see many times where classes of people were denied service either legally or just through people's norms, that these were classes that were outcasts, not seen as fully human, and as a result, didn't deserve to be the recipients of services provided by the company. And of course, in the United States, we don't have to go too far back in history to see this existing. We can see this existing in the efforts to integrate lunch counters and other spaces of service where Black customers were not allowed. And if they were allowed, they had to sit separately from white customers. And so we see, as part of American history, denials of service have always been part of institutionalized discrimination. In fact, the Jim Crow South was predicated on the Supreme Court, on a legal ruling of separate but equal, which we saw emerge from the Plessy versus Ferguson case in 1896. And it wasn't until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that's a long time, that legal segregation ended. Although social segregation still existed, even though it was against the law to segregate, it was still a practice that could be found in many areas. The fact that discrimination can exist in denials of service so far, so long after legally it had ceased to exist, just shows that while laws may change, social norms can take a lot longer to catch up. And sometimes, unfortunately, laws can change back, as we're seeing right now, to allow for legal discrimination. Just because we make progress in ending discrimination at one time doesn't mean that that progress will always be there. And we're seeing this today with this most recent case. Because of the pervasiveness of discrimination in service and customer experience, I was fortunate enough to be part of a panel back in July of 2020 that was brought together by the Customer Experience Professionals Association, specifically the chapters of Boston and Atlanta, where we discussed civil rights and customer experience. We discussed customer experience as a way to promote racial equity. We discussed addressing bias in customer experiences and how we can go about capturing customer voices around issues of race in service delivery. Part of the reason I was asked to be on this panel goes back to my own dissertation research in Arab-owned liquor stores in metropolitan Detroit. One of the reasons why I studied these liquor stores was that I was interested in studying intercultural communication. I was interested in places where different groups would be coming together in contact. In our own personal lives, we can choose who our friends are. We can choose often who we live next to. You can't always choose who you buy aspirin from. You can't always choose who you buy snacks from or some other item, especially when the selling of those items is done by a niche group, a group that has, for a variety of reasons, kind of cornered the market on these kinds of businesses. Thus, in Detroit, while the majority of Detroiters are African American, the majority of the liquor stores are owned by people from the Arab world. By going to these sites, I was able to study what happens when these groups come together in contact. a part of this work, I've also been collecting examples where people have claimed they have been denied service or they have been given lesser service because of their skin color. I presented some of this material at the American Sociological Association meeting some years ago in a paper presentation titled, "The Customer is Always Right Unless the Customer is Black." As part of this presentation, I went through a lot of different examples where people collected through their own cell phones being denied service on the basis of being Black, or at least their perception that they were being denied service because they were Black. These cases are important because being a customer involves a certain standard, a certain status that you are seeking a service. To be denied that service is to be denied that you are worthy of that status of being a customer. And just like in the 303 Creative case, people who are same-sex couples are not being viewed as fully customer. They're not given the status of being worthwhile or worthy of that service. Clearly, the sentiment, "you're not welcome here," is still alive and well. Increasing denials of service is somewhat ironic, given that we live in a service economy, where the number of service jobs, the number of people working in service, the number of companies devoted to service greatly outnumbers the types of companies either in manufacturing or even agriculture, that most people work in the service industry. We might be living in the service economy, but what does the word service even mean? When we talk about service, what are we talking about? The origins of the word can be traced as far back as 1100 AD. The word also is linked to the Latin servus, which means slave. This meaning of service would morph into different conceptualizations of acts of service, being a servant to another, conditions of servitude, and of course, the very notion of service itself. When we take all of these ways, all of the ways in which we think and talk about service, I would say that there's this fundamental root to it. And that root involves a sense of connection and intimacy, that we're joined together, even for a fleeting moment, where we have to work together to accomplish some goal. Someone might be looking for help. Someone might be looking for assistance. Someone might be looking to buy something. Somebody might be looking for some product that they need to complete a task or fulfill their lives. As we all know, stuff helps to fulfill us. Another person is in a position to provide what is needed, whether product, good, or service, or even aid. And it's that ability of one to assist another, that connection, that forms the foundation of service. So in many ways, when we commit acts of service, we are doing something, some act with somebody else in mind. And by focusing our attention on this other person, we are in the process lessening the focus on ourselves. We're not thinking about us per se, we are thinking about them. It's for this reason, this thinking about someone else and not ourselves, that service is a foundational part of recovery programs. For instance, there's a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that you can only keep what you have by giving it away. This means that if you want to maintain your sobriety, if you want to maintain not drinking, the way in which you keep that, you maintain that, is by helping someone else. You have to give what you know, what you've accomplished in the program, to someone else through acts of service. From what I know about 12-step programs, both looking at them and being involved in some, is that they operate through the voluntary efforts of group members. This is why volunteerism and service are part of the traditions of most, if not all, of these programs. Whether making coffee, hosting a meeting, welcoming newcomers, sharing one's own story during meetings, being a sponsor to someone who's in need of a sponsor, or whatever other means that needs to be done, work that needs to be done for the group. These efforts all help to extend the program to others who are in need. And it helps other members of the program in their recovery. And so this important act of service is we remove the focus on us, do something for someone else, and in the process, build our own recovery. In looking at acts of service in recovery, I came across this really lovely quote from a website that's called amethystrecovery.org. And the quote goes as follows: "Every act that we perform has an effect on those around us, which in turn affects the balance of everything we know. The balance of our very lives is determined by the quality of our actions. This is not to say that we should embrace character defects such as pride or self-centeredness. In fact, we should do the very opposite. To recognize the importance of our actions towards others is not to inflate our own egos, but rather to accept that we do not outrank anyone else. And the ultimate demonstration of the humility that accompanies such a valuable realization is the performance of service work." To provide service is to be humble before another. It's an act of humility. It's not an act of serving our own ego. It's actually a denial of our own ego. And we do this, we provide this service willingly because this not only helps someone else, but in the end, it also strengthens us. Our acts of humility connects us to our very own humanity. Recently, I've been watching a lot of the hit TV show on Hulu called The Bear. If you've watched The Bear, you know it's about a lot of things. It's not just about food and restaurant. It's about people trying to find themselves and trying to find themselves, in fact, through recovery. And Al-Anon, as a recovery program, does figure into the show The Bear. One of my favorite episodes that I just watched is episode 7 on season 2 called Forks. In this episode, one of the main characters, Richie, goes to one of the top-rated restaurants in the world, which happens to be located in Chicago. And he goes there to learn what it means to work in a top establishment. His first job, when showing up there, was just polishing forks. And he had to polish forks for hours on end. And even though he thought the forks were good enough, his supervisor would tell them that there's a smudge. And you would wonder, what's the big deal about a smudge on a fork? Who cares? It's just a smudge on a fork. What does it matter? When Richie asked his supervisor, why does he even do this type of work? Why does he care so much about forks? Why is he in the restaurant business? Is it because he really likes food and wants to become a cook? His supervisor says, no, I don't want to become a cook. I'm interested in providing service to customers. The reason why he's so interested in providing service is because he himself is an alcoholic. He went through many years of drinking where he couldn't find his way out of that behavior. And it was through going to AA, through doing recovery work, that he became familiar with the importance of service. Another thing I really like about this episode is that so much of the episode is about serving others. All the little details and going out of your way to please customers becomes the foundation of every scene. The idea of going above and beyond, because for no other reason than it will make people happy. It will make their day. By giving of ourselves, we provide to someone else. And seeing the positive outcomes of that act fills us up as a result. Food is just the vehicle for all the things that happen around it, both in terms of providing a good customer experience and also furthering our own sense of who we are as human beings. And a key thing here is all of this happens not because the people working there have to do it. There's other restaurants they can work at. There's ones that pay less attention to all these details. They do it because they want to do it. They do it because they see what it brings others and what it brings to themselves. By giving of themselves in this kind of way, they are simultaneously making themselves more whole. So where does this put us in relation to the Supreme Court case regarding 303 Creative LLC? as well as considerations of customer experience and experience design. There can be a lot of motivations for opening and or working for a business, especially a service business that's focusing on delivering experiences. Ideally, one of those reasons would be that you want to provide services and experiences for people, that you want to provide experiences that make people happy. But it's not just about providing a service, but it's about being in service to others. It's about giving of oneself for the aid of others, to be a servant to others to make their lives better. To deny service, going back to this notion of what is service, to deny service is in many respects to deny that the customer has status that should be honored. If I don't give service to you, if I refuse you service, it's because I made the judgment that you're not worthy of that service, that I refuse to humble myself before you. It is to refuse putting one in a position of servant to the needs of others. And ultimately, it is to violate the entire notion of the idea of a service economy. Now, I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in bars, I've worked in the service industry, and there are times when customers do things that result in them being denied service. They commit an act that violates the employee, that creates a problematic situation. They act in a way that's not appropriate. And in all those instances, they should be denied service. But should someone be denied service simply because of who they are? Does their very act of being mean that they aren't worthy of having service extended to them? Where the outcome of this movement to deny service ends is hard to say. It's interesting that one positive outcome, perhaps, to emerge from the 303 Creative case is that the owner has publicly stated her biases, to which the internet has responded, as the internet often will. From Yelp comments saying, "Do not support this business," to "I am ashamed of who you represent," and "We are back in the 60s and Jim Crow," and finally, "At least the entire world now knows that this business discriminates and should never be used." Perhaps businesses should be regulated to state out front who they will not serve, and then let the market decide who they would like to support. If you list all the people you don't want to serve, maybe the public is going to decide you're one of the businesses that they don't want to support. It would make sense and be part of the free market economy that you can choose not to provide services. We can choose not to seek your services. This would be a rough road to go down, because ultimately what makes a multicultural society function, what brings us all together from all these different backgrounds, is embracing higher ideals, such as service. The idea that people can enter into a relationship, no matter how brief, to engage in acts of seeking service and providing service. That we are all worth getting service if we comport ourselves in a way that demonstrates our need for service. And when that breaks down, the glue that holds it together can start to lose its adhesion and its strength. So we will see where all of this goes, how people respond to actively advertising, "You're not welcome here." And one of the things about this that is perhaps most disappointing or most concerning is the fact that commerce coming together can create connection, can bring people together who might not otherwise be in contact with one another, and allow us to form personal relationships. And those connections can't take place if we don't put service first.